There's a lot of pressure to just grow, but it also can create unnatural pressures to do things that maybe the company isn't ready for.
Do you want to impact the world and still turn a profit? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to Growth Everywhere. This is the show where you'll find real conversations with real entrepreneurs. They'll share everything from their biggest struggle to the exact strategies they use on a daily basis. So if you're ready for a value-packed interview, listen on. Here's your host, Eric Sue.
Before we jump into today's interview, if you guys could leave a review and a rating and also subscribe as well, that would be a huge help to the podcast. So if you actually enjoy the content and you'd like to hear more of it, please support us by leaving us a review and subscribe to the podcast as well. Thanks so much. All right, everybody. Today we have Rod Fuentes, who is the CEO of ListenLoop. ListenLoop does account-based marketing in a B2B advertising platform. I'm actually going to let Rod talk about what that actually means. So Rod, how are you doing?
Doing great, full of energy. ABM is definitely a hot space, has been since about late 2015. And, I think we're at that point now where we're past the hype curve and people are getting down to business and really executing campaigns. That's been the trajectory we're seeing in the market over the last year. So, you pretty much nailed it. ListenLoop is an account-based advertising software, and we primarily help a B2B marketer who wants to go after a specific set of companies that they need to sell to. They will give us that list. They'll tell us what job titles they want to target, and they'll give us their ads. We'll put those into the system. You'll tell us what marketing budget you want to put towards this per month, and our software does the job of placing ads directly on those target companies on the job titles that you selected as they browse the web. New York Times, USA Today, as they're looking at their news or et cetera, you're going to start hitting them with your ads. So that's what we're about. And, we're right now, I feel like we're just harvesting a lot of the pent-up demand in the market for a tool like this.
Well, before we dive into the tool a little more, I want to get a little insight into, your background. What's your background and how did you get to where you are now?
Yeah, my background is all over the place, man. I'm an electrical engineer from Yale, 2006, and then straight from there I went to Columbia Law School, focused on patent litigation, IP rights, and I practiced law for almost 3 years at a law firm called Fish and Richardson, #1 IP firm in the U.S. And, through that experience, really, learned that I really love the law, very intellectually stimulating. But I found myself being more curious about my clients' business problems and their sales and their marketing side of the house. So when a friend of mine kept kind of nagging at me to join him in his startup for the course of about a year and a half while at the law firm, I eventually just had to do it. It was something that was kind of now or never, and I was already being so curious about it while I was at the firm. So that's what really prompted me to jump 2 feet into the MarTech space. That was about 5 or 6 years ago, and man, I never looked back. It's a really exciting time to be in MarTech. There's a lot of stats out there about how the CMO is going to be outspending the CIO, and you definitely feel it in the market. I'm 33.
Wow, so young. Okay, so let's look at this, right? So let's back up a second. So we electrical engineer at Yale, and then you said practice or learn how to become a lawyer at you said Columbia?
Yep.
Okay, so super smart guy, and then now you're running this crazy company right now. I've looked at some of the investors, some great investors as well. So I think one question that automatically pops up is, what's your process for learning? How do you go about learning, all this new stuff, right? Because electrical engineer completely different from, law.
What a great question. No one's ever asked me that. What's my process for learning? I personally am a very visual learner. For me, learning from audio listening is really hard. And so if you ever see me in a meeting, I'm usually furiously taking down notes of everything that I'm hearing, almost a verbatim copy or transcription of everything I'm hearing. And it has to do with being able to look at what I'm hearing, because if I just hear it and don't process it visually, it just goes kind of one in one ear, out the other. So that's kind of very basic building block for me. Visual is very important. Lately, I have found myself really drawn to courses on Udemy, for instance, or these like video learning platforms, because they're visual and audio, and I could learn on my commute times in between work. So, the kinds of things I'll learn on these platforms are marketing stacks, learn how to do MailChimp hacks, outreach hacks, Pardot, Marketo, HubSpot hacks, the way different people are using the platforms. Those are all different ways that I'm constantly learning to kind of stay up with the technology that people are using, that our clients are using. So that's a big part of it. And personally, looking back at my law school days and even back in electrical engineering days, I wish there had been more of that, right? Because sitting in a lecture with a professor kind of telling you via audio, right, in-person audio, was really hard, right? And it's very interesting that the new generation of learners, right, people who are in middle school, high school now, might have a very different experience than what maybe you and I had coming into these educational fields.
Totally. Yeah. I've heard something, this is sidetracking a little bit, but, there's some parents that I know that are sending their kids to, I think they're called STEM programs. I don't know too much about them, but it's basically like you drop them in and like they go through project-based learning instead of just, hey, this is how it is. And like, take a test and that's it. But, I think that's particularly compelling because I think I would have excelled at that. I'm not particularly interested in like sitting through a college or college lecture hall where it's like hundreds of students. As a matter of fact, I slugged my way through college, but I just always hated it. But anyway, so let's talk about the company too. So I think you gave like some kind of practical examples, but maybe there's a case study you can share where a company used ListenLoop and then they saw some amazing results. Is there anything that comes top of mind right now?
Yeah, I mean, the one that comes top of mind, the most recent one, is a company called Engagio. They're led by John Miller, who's, some call him the grandfather of account-based marketing. He was an early co-founder of Marketo. And so Charlie Liang there is the director of marketing, and he used ListenLoop to combine and supplement their marketing activities with advertising to specific lists of target accounts. For them, the results were pretty interesting. What they were able to show is, let me back up, what their process and methodology was to expose a list of accounts to account-based marketing activities, and then have a correlated group of, a similar cohort of accounts not exposed to their account-based marketing activities. And then they further broke that down into not just account-based activities, but the individual activities that they were running. So advertising versus direct mail versus, the other parts of their play that they were running. And they saw some really interesting numbers around increased engagement of the target accounts when these accounts were exposed to ads. So, for example, accounts that were exposed to account-based marketing activities overall and were not exposed to ads had a 22% increase in web traffic engagement. So that's pretty good, right? Just doing an account-based marketing approach, period, is producing more web traffic. That's great. But then when you added advertising on top of your account-based activities, they were seeing a 43% increase in web traffic engagement from their target accounts, right? Same for engagement via net new visitors, similar types of improvements. Without ads, 8% increase with just account-based activities versus 47% increase if you were to layer in ads. And so these are early indicators of success for an account-based program, because at the end of the day, an account-based program has to do with engagement. The way a large corporation buys software nowadays or any large product is through a committee, essentially, of multiple stakeholders. And if you're not engaging them, then you're not going to be able to sell to them. They need to be involved with that process.
And by the way, we should probably back up a second. So I'm sure some people are probably wondering, going through this podcast, what is account-based marketing? So maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, it's a great point. A year ago, I would always make a point to make sure we were defining account-based marketing precisely for that reason. But account-based marketing is a strategy, right? It's not an individual tool. It's not a thing. It's a strategy that a sales and marketing team will use to influence and close a specific set of accounts. So this is unlike maybe your general inbound marketing, where you're putting messaging out there, attracting visitors with content, getting them into the funnel with a form submit, and then email marketing to them across the life cycle of their buyer journey. So to precisely define it, account-based marketing is a strategy whereby, number one, sales and marketing teams are aligned on, number 2, a specific list of accounts that they want to go after. Number 3, you're using one or more communication channels to reach out to those accounts. And number 4, you're measuring results of your campaign at the account level as opposed to the individual lead or contact level. So that's how we think of defining account-based marketing or an account-based strategy. And a lot of companies who are doing this well are seeing incredible results as a result of implementing their ABM campaign.
So when you say account-based, when you say at the account level versus the individual lead level, you mean account could be at the company level, right? So a couple people at Microsoft versus just one person at Microsoft.
That's correct. And here's why. I mean, I think this example really sums it up in a nutshell. The new paradigm for people downloading content, reviewing content is the following pattern. When the CIO of Microsoft wants to explore some new technology that may be relevant to Microsoft, do you think the CIO is out there browsing the web and maybe individually, downloading all these white papers and attending these webinars? No. The CIO is crazy busy, right? Everyone's nipping at his heels for his time or her time, and it's a cluster, right? So what they're doing is that they're delegating that task to people on their team to do the research, to go out and download those white papers and those ebooks and learn more and differentiate all the different vendors in the field for whatever software they're looking at, right? And then that information is trickled, it's shared, it's socialized internally in a little committee, or you can imagine them all sitting around in a conference room, and a decision is reached over time, right? So if you were to measure your campaign and said, hey, we're targeting so-and-so, the CIO of Microsoft, oh, bummer, they never downloaded a form. Geez, I guess that campaign didn't work. That's foolish because the campaign may be working, but if you measure the results at the account level, Microsoft, oh, interesting, the director of IT actually downloaded an ebook and the manager of IT was looking at this, attended this webinar, right? Now you're getting a more holistic picture about what the account is doing, multiple leads at a given account. And you get an idea of how much the account is engaging as opposed to an individual person who may not have direct kind of last click attribution engagement with your marketing.
Got it. Okay. So let's use a practical example. I mean, let's say, let's continue with the Microsoft example. The sales team comes to the marketing team. They have a bunch of, maybe a list of emails of people they want to target. Is that how it works?
Effectively, yes. You could start with that. A list of emails. You would strip out the domains, so you have the company domains of the accounts you want to target, and then from there to orchestrate an account-based strategy. Let me back up. Are you talking about?
I'm talking about ListenLoop
account-based
specifically.
Strategy? Oh, you're talking about ListenLoop. Okay, specifically. So if you have a list of emails, you want to get the domains of the target accounts, and preferably you want to get the specific location of where those contacts will sit. So ListenLoop does a lot of work on targeting your specific contacts and accounts in specific locations, right? Because Microsoft, continuing that example, they've got dozens of locations around the world, right? Lots of offices. If you know that you're going after the CIO, well, are they sitting in Seattle or are they sitting in Dallas? Where are they? If you knew that, you could target your ads even more accurately at the set of contacts you want to get after. So that's something we recommend that your list include. Most people have this information in their CRM already. When they create a contact in their CRM, it's got the person's email address, the website of the company where they work, and an address. So for most people, this is already, it's already in their data sets. You take that list, you throw it into ListenLoop, you give us your ads, you put a budget in, and you're off to the races.
Great. And the ads that people are creating, are they targeted towards that specific company? Is that how is that how the conversion rates go up, or is it something else?
So the ads aren't generally targeted specifically to a company. ListenLoop does have a feature called pre-roll personalization, where we will add an animation on top of your ads that will specifically include the logo of the companies that you're targeting in an effort to create personalization and more of a connection with the viewer. But generally speaking, let's say the last 50 campaigns that clients have run through the ListenLoop system, the best practice and most common thing we're seeing is some type of ads that are segmented to the list of companies they're going after, or segmented to the buyer persona that they're going after. So a concrete example is this. Let's say your Engagio, maybe, and you're targeting marketers, right? Well, you can imagine they might have two different buyer personas. One buyer persona might be a marketer and maybe like a VP of marketing type, and another buyer persona might be a VP of salesperson, right? So that being the case, you can imagine them creating two different sets of ads. One ad that has messaging that resonates with the marketer, and another set of ads that resonate with the salesperson, and each have individual pain points that they're trying to address. That's one example. Now, the other example is to segment across industries or companies. So if you have a list of, let's say, 1,000 accounts and 500 are in finance and 500 are brick and mortar locations, maybe like retail brick and mortar locations, then again, you could imagine segmenting your messaging, your ads, so that they speak to the buyers that are receiving this content.
Got it. And I can see some people probably thinking, in the audience right now, so, how is this different than, let's say, if we use Facebook as an example, we upload all the emails as a custom audience, and then we make, we can make ads tailored to, that specific audience. How is ListenLoop different from that besides the personalization point?
That's it. Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, number one, we recommend that you do that anyway, because we're using a different channel, right? When people are in Facebook, that's a different mentality. So when you hit them with ads there, that actually represents something different. When you use LinkedIn to do something similar, you're hitting them when they're in their sponsored update feed, right? When you're using ListenLoop, you're hitting them when they're on the website, an ad-supported publisher site like USA Today, New York Times, etc. So number one, if you have the budget and you have the capability and resources, I'd say do all three. Now, if you have to pick one or the other, the relative differences are these. When you use a CRM retargeting tool, like you've described, i.e. upload a list of email contacts into an audience creator, what you're really doing is you're relying on, let's say, Facebook, for instance, to have a cookie on file for a given email address, right? Now, typically, the way that these companies and Facebook does this is that when you log into Facebook, you're typing in, let's say mine is, jrf@gmail.com, and a cookie is being dropped on me when that happens. And that cookie is then being associated to my email address, and it's being renewed every time I log in from my mobile phone, from my desktop, and that's how they have that cookie on file. So now, if you were to target a CRM audience that includes jrf@gmail.com, that'll hit their database. They'll say, "Oh, yep, we've got a match. That's Rod. Go ahead and start sending them ads because we have an advertising cookie on them." So here's the problem. That all sounds awesome. It works really great if you're in B2C, business to consumer marketing. Works fantastic. I mean, like the match rates are 90% plus. I've heard some providers claim 97% match rates. But here's the rub: if you're in B2B, the match rates can suffer. I've heard match rates of 25 to 35%, depending on your segment in B2B, and that tends to make sense, right? Because I mean, are you using your business address to log into Facebook? I mean, are you even using your business address when you created your LinkedIn account how many years ago? No. So like that's part of the problem, right? Not a lot of people are using their business email addresses for transactions online, and so the coverage is naturally lower. So that's something that the industry is constantly trying to address because it's clear everyone wants that capability. And I think today the closest you can get, the probably kind of best match rates you can get for CRM retargeting is probably the LinkedIn system, right? Because there at least you can kind of visualize, okay, some people are using their email, their business email to log in. Some people are kind of including secondary, tertiary email addresses for their companies in their LinkedIn account. So you could start seeing a case for that there.
Got it. Okay. And for you guys, I mean, so is it basically like 100%, or I mean, what does it look like? Because I guess how are you bypassing all of this?
Mm-hmm. So for us, the difference is that we're not using a one-to-one cookie match when we're advertising to a specific account. Instead, we're using a method that we came up with, which we call a triangulation method. Essentially, what we do is we take first-party data that we've been collecting for 3.5 years. We take third-party data that we license from providers like Blue Kai, Lotame, Bombora, et cetera, lots of different audience providers out there. And we also take geolocation data. So then we overlap these different data sources on top of each other. We take job title audiences, we take firmographic industry audiences, we take geolocations. We overlap all these different data sources on top of each other and create a model for what is a tiny area of overlap between job titles, accounts, locations that represents, let's say, a B2B VP of marketing at Oracle in Boston, right? And then that's how we're able to deliver ads. So we're doing an inference, it's a statistical inference that it is a given person at a given account at a given location. And with that, we're able to generate 70% match rates in North America. And then across all the campaigns that we've run, I think the match rate's about 62% when you factor in some of the international campaigns in the system.
So everyone else, I've purposely asked a lot of specific questions so everyone can kind of, I think this is a massive opportunity right now. I think the fact that many marketers are talking about it, or not many are talking about it, that's even more of a reason to explore it. So I guess another question for you would be, what does pricing look like for this stuff?
For
you
systems
guys
in general or ListenLoop in particular?
ListenLoop.
So ListenLoop's pricing is $99 a month. That includes targeting for 100 accounts that you want to go after. And we only count accounts that have received impressions. So, we're really friendly to just get in there, get started. I think the market right now is in an exploratory phase. Everyone wants to try it. Everyone's very hesitant to sign up for a 1-2 year contract, right? And with good reason. It's not a new tactic, but the tools that are helping people deploy the tactic are new, like ListenLoop and others. And so people want to have that feeling of, hey, I want to dip my toes in, feel the water's warm, and then I'll jump in. So we're very friendly to that. Once you're targeting hundreds or possibly thousands of accounts, then you start getting volume-based pricing where, if you're, I think targeting 1,000 accounts is 59 cents per account. So, that's how you can kind of dip your toes in, get into it, run a campaign, maybe 300-400 accounts, see that it's performing for you, and then, scale up, scale down as you need to.
And what's working for you today in terms of customer acquisition? I guess what's the one most effective thing? I'll keep it even simpler.
The most effective thing for us is, I'm sure I sound biased, but it's account-based marketing. We go after specific sets of clients using a mix of channels. Every quarter, we put together a list of target accounts, and our sequence is basically the following. 1, we start with ads probably about 1 month in advance of, 2, an email campaign directed at specific contacts from top to bottom, from the manager to the director to the VP to the CMO. And then we follow up with phone calls on people who've opened up our emails at least 3 times. And then for the people we've had connections with and or email replies from, we'll follow up with some direct mail, usually a postcard or a book that's relevant to their space as a thank you, as a follow-up. And then the last piece of it is, wherever we can, we try to meet these people at events. Marketo Marketing Summit, the Salesforce Dreamforce, the HubSpot conference. So a lot of our users are hanging out at these conferences. That's
how are you managing
this
whole process? It isn't all through ListenLoop, right? How are you managing? You're meeting them in person, you're sending them postcards and things like that.
Yep. Just a lot of for us, we're a small company, right? We're 6 employees, and for us, we're managing it through Google Spreadsheet. Yeah, just coordinating all these different pieces of it in terms of the direct mail, the this and that and the other. The email marketing piece, we use Outreach to manage that aspect of it, and the phone calls also go through Outreach. The advertising, of course, is happening through ListenLoop. And the events, the events are the piece, the direct mail and the events are the pieces that we're using Google Spreadsheets to kind of manage that, make sure that those are being sent out to whom, et cetera.
So next question I have for you is around the struggles growing this business. What's one big struggle you faced?
I think the biggest struggle we faced at the very earliest, when we first began the business, was making sure you had product market fit. 3-4 years ago, I feel like I was still a young entrepreneur, not in terms of my age, but in terms of my years of experience in entrepreneurship. And if you follow along the culture of entrepreneurship and startups, there's a lot of pressure to just grow, and that is definitely good, right? Your audience will resonate with that. Everyone feels it. That is a positive part of the startup mentality. But it also can create unnatural pressures to do things that maybe the company isn't ready for. So a concrete example for us is, I think it was maybe 2014, and I felt at the time that we had to make 2 independent bets, and both of them were going to have to pay off in order for us to be, wildly successful. This is a different product back then, and those 2 independent bets were these. One, we had to prove we had product market fit in our metrics in order to attract more investment and not run out of money. And 2, we had to generate enough sales in order to show investors that this was wildly successful, moonshot, rocket ship. You got to invest now or you're going to fear on missing out. And I think if you have it, if you have all the time in the world and all the resources in the world, then the sequence you would use, the proper sequence you would use, is to build the product, measure retention, measure engagement, measure usage, demonstrate that it's providing value to the end user, the client, demonstrate that they freaking love the product, that, to use the kind of Sean Ellis metric of product market fit, if you were to, 40%, you tell them like, hey, we're going to go away. And if 40% are crying about it, then awesome. You're on the right path, right? And then you hire up salespeople. You start just selling the heck out of the product and marketing and just go, all out. And then you have those sales metrics in place. Then you go out to the markets and you show this to investors, and they shower money on you.
I guess a question would be, when you talk about the product market fit, I mean, you're doing a lot of customer development in that phase, aren't you? Because you have but I guess the question would be, how many customers did you have at a time when you ran that survey, you're like, okay, let's go ahead and go all in, right? Because I'm assuming at that time you don't have many customers, right?
Yeah. You always suffer from a low sample size problem at the early stages of a startup, no doubt, unless you're doing, free users, and that's a whole other ballgame. But I think at the time when I'm kind of having this memory of, I think we maybe had 30 or 40 clients, which is probably just above okay in terms of sample size, right? Like central limit theorem says 30 sample size is just about good to draw some kind of statistical inference. So it was right around that number. But the point of the story that I want to kind of nail down is that is the correct path to do it. Very few people have the opportunity to do the correct path, right? Because there's tons of other pressures impacting your decisions, such as, hey, we're going to run out of money. We don't have infinite resources and infinite time to do this in. We've got 8 months. We've got 8 months to figure out product market fit, and that's because we need 4 more months to sell the hell out of it, and then we need to show the metrics that we need to have, right? And so that pressure to grow and to show product market fit, it can create decisions where we were faced with having to do 2 things at the same time. We had to sell the heck out of the product, and we had to basically, have a leap of faith that the product we were then building had product market fit de facto. And if it doesn't, then we're dead, right? And so that's tough, because at that time in 2014, I'd say we were wrong, right? Looking back on it, we sold the product, and it didn't have that 40% number. 40% of people were not very disappointed when we told them, hey, we're going to have to tuck this away. And yeah, there's a small customer base. This is a feedback software. It used to collect feedback inside of a product, inside of a software product. And that's a really tough pill to swallow. That's really hard to do, to force yourself to make those 2 independent bets, right? To sell it and to assume you have product market fit. And growth, the pressures of growth and the pressures of limited time and resources will do that.
100%, man. Cool. Thanks for sharing that. Final question from my side. What's one must-read book you'd recommend to everyone?
Must read. I think everyone's already read it, though, so I don't know if that's going to be very useful. I think everyone absolutely needs to read The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. I mean, that book is just a treasure trove of advice and future wisdom that, I'm sure I have not used all the wisdom that's in there yet, but it's in there. It's like a field book for the trench warfare that startup founders find themselves in.
I think it's time for a reread, just because I think you saying that somehow sparked some kind of reaction where it's like, you should reread it now. So I might just take it off my bookshelf and do that. But Rod, this has been great. Everyone should check out ListenLoop, FYI. But Rod, what's the best way for people to find you online?
ListenLoop.com, and my email is rod@listenloop.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and I always love chatting with other entrepreneurs, founders, and marketers. So if you want to start a conversation online via LinkedIn, we can trade some tips, some advice. I'll always love answering questions from the community.
Appreciate it. Thanks for doing this, Rod.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Growth Everywhere. If you loved what you heard, be sure to head back to growtheverywhere.com for today's show notes and a ton of additional resources. But before you go, hit the subscribe button to avoid missing out on next week's value-packed interview. Enjoy the rest of your week, and remember to take action and continue growing.